Hi, and welcome back to another series on Checkmate the Matrix. And today we're going to be having a great chat with someone that I've been reading a lot about lately, and that's Michael Feeley. Now, I mean, he's been sort of like in this, let's just say, this realm for a very long time, talking about these types of things. So I'm going to go backwards and forwards with him, try to get some information about what he's been doing, what he's done in the past, and what he's actually got planned for now and for the future. So I'm very excited about this. Welcome, Michael, and how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for the invite. I look forward to it.
No problem whatsoever. I mean, I've actually read quite a lot about sort of what you've been doing recently, but also going back in the past as well. So something that sticks out like to me because of like a lot of the stuff that I've wrote and the groups that I sort of like am involved in is about the straw man. Now, can you just like explain a little bit to people like how you got involved in the documentary and what it involved, and basically who you were with as well?
Okay. Well, I got involved in the documentary based on a previous career. And that previous career was that I spent 17 years of a 30-year career in the police force. And I served in London and Birmingham, which are England's obviously two largest cities. And I was frontline response, dealing with emergency and non-emergency calls, dealing with all different levels of crime. A lot of the time being first on scene. In 2009, or leading up to 2009, I was becoming extremely disillusioned with the career that I was in, because I was being pretty much ordered to do things that, one, were immoral, two, were illegal, and three, I didn't want to do. So I said no. And I pretty much went on strike. And even though you can't go on strike as a police officer legally, I was working to roll and doing even less than that. I was refusing to arrest people. I was refusing to do things that I knew were not right. I saw basically manipulations of figures, the manipulation of crime figures, where those who were manipulating those crime figures were rewarded with cash bonuses for crime management, when all they were doing really was manipulating the figures. And that was really low level through lots and lots of statistics, response times, to say crime figures. So I was becoming extremely disillusioned and quite rebellious from within the system anyway. And then at the same time, miraculously, I was beginning to be introduced to the world of supernatural and paranormal. Now, this was at the same time that I was becoming extremely disillusioned with where I was at and where my life was going and the environment that I had to constantly be in for 10, 12 hours a day. So with the paranormal supernatural happenings, which were now becoming every day and every night, and the complete disillusionment and being sick to the back teeth of being in that environment, I actually resigned in 2009. And I had my exit interview with the chief superintendent, and my parting words were, "You tell me what to do, but I'm the one who decides whether or not I do it. Bye-bye." And I just walked out. Now, the only surprise was that there was no emotion in the resignation, because for everyone who knew me during my career, they knew that I was actually married to the police. They used to joke that if you were to slice a vein, the police would come out instead of blood. So I was absolutely dedicated. I never took any annual leave. I never took any time off. I was always there, and I was really, really married to that job. So to just walk out without any emotion, without anything to actually walk out to, was really probably a decision that felt right to me and turned out to be right. But obviously at a time when we're going into the first global recession and people are losing their jobs and losing their houses, to actually voluntarily walk out of a secure career really raised a few eyebrows. But it was my decision, it was my life, and that's what I did, and I had no regrets. And I certainly don't miss, I miss what the service was, I don't miss what it became. And one of the reasons that I left is because of what it did become. So that's why I got involved in Strawman, Nature of the Cage. The filmmakers got in touch because I was pretty much in various places over the internet, talking about the system, whistleblowing about various things. And they came across me. And as a result of having kind of the eyes inside the service, they asked if they could come and interview me as part of their documentary. So they attended my home address, and we were talking about, what do the police know about the law? What do police know about common law? Do they know the difference between common law, statute law, acts, sections, and all these? And I had to admit that no. And the only reason that I understood and knew about that is because I took it upon myself to actually research it. And that was after I'd left. So the police understand the definitions of what the legality of certain crimes are. When I came out of Hendon Training College, I could have given you the definition for any single crime in the UK, verbatim. I could have told you what robbery was, what theft was, what burglary was, etc. But there's no distinction between the different laws. It is really just words on a charge sheet. And that is why they really came to my house and interviewed me, really in a kind of an inside view, which is quite rare, because you don't get many people that actually leave a secure career. When you join the police, as I did, I signed up for 30 years. So that is really how I came to do Nature of the Cage. And I do occasionally see snippets of it, and I do really validate and confirm what I said at the time, which was probably about 10, 11 years ago now, but it still stands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good in a way, to be able to chat with you about this and to talk about that, because obviously it's still an ongoing subject, if not now, even more now, let's just say since 2020, when there was a lot more people starting to go, hang on a second, and putting themselves in a position where they would have to actually start asking these questions of, let's just say the police officers, and when I get into, let's just say, discussions, and we say things, and you do obviously put your head above the parapet, as it was, to for people to come back at you. And one of the things that I get quite a lot of saying, "Oh, that's just a load of bullshit." Then people weren't real. He wasn't an ex-police officer. So, but you get that. But there now, at least, you're coming and saying, well, there you were on that documentary. They approached you. You didn't approach them. And you had just, very recently from that time, just left the actual force voluntarily as well.
Yes. No, absolutely. I mean, when the documentary was filmed, it was probably within 12 months of leaving. So it was quite fresh in terms of the transition. People will say that you were never really in the police. Well, yes, I was. I've been on other places where people have said, I know for a fact that this guy is cyber police. Really? I've never been involved in cyber police, so I don't know where you're getting your facts from. You're obviously just making it up. You will do. Now, when I've been on forums and different places, live forums, trying to help people that actually do stand up to the police and do ask these questions. And I've always advised them how best to deal with such an encounter. And how to best deal with an encounter is that you must allow space for the officer to retreat. Because what you are up against is a wall of ego, a wall of power, a wall of authority. And if you ever see two rhinos or two wildebeests locking horns, if you approach an officer in the wrong way, then you are really going to be locking horns. And that's not going to turn out well for the person who is going up against the police officer, because they will put the handcuffs on you and ask questions later. That is really what you don't want. You need to give them space to retreat. You need to allow them to retreat so that they can save face. And this is the advice that I've always given on live forums when I've been invited to speak about, stop the police and all this kind. That the police know less about the law than people who research the law. The police, just like any other institution, know what they are told. And their level of awareness doesn't go beyond what they're told unless they take it upon themselves to look into it. So the same as doctors, the same as paramedics, the same as fire brigade, the same as any institution, you are bound by your training, and your training is bound by other people. So when you go into these systems and you turn around and say, I now wish to revoke equity law, and I under what authority do you serve as a magistrate, you are going up against people who are completely ignorant of what you are saying, because their training doesn't mention that. If you go up to a doc and start talking about nutrition, they have about 7 minutes training on nutrition in 7 years of doctor training. So it really goes above their head, that they really don't understand what you are saying. So the problem that you have, and the problem that you have to encounter, is an ignorant system that is bound by its training. So if I go up to a police officer, do you understand the difference between common law and statute law, maritime law, commerce law? It's going to be, well, no, but what difference does it make anyway? So you are up against a complete wall of ignorance. So I've always encouraged people to deal with it correctly, and that must be that you must give the officer space to retreat with their face intact, because if you don't, it really will be in the van now and ask questions later, and nobody really wants that in scenario. So yes, I was a true police officer. Can I prove it? Yes. Do I feel the need to prove it? No. They approached me to do a documentary because they'd seen me on the internet talking about the police, talking about me being an ex-police officer, and that was a perfect match for the ethos of the documentary. And if people don't believe that I was truly a serving officer, well then so be it. But I was, and I can prove it, but I don't feel the need to. But yes, they approached me. I gave it true and frank as I saw it, and as I saw it, is really a correct reflection of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really good. So I mean, at the end of the day, we have to let everybody make their own mind up what they want to actually believe, but certainly believing and knowing is not the same thing. So you know that you were a police officer, and what happened and why you actually ended up in that documentary, and it's certainly still completely valid. Everything that was said in there, it's not as if it was like, oh, it's only valid for what, 2010, 2011, doesn't matter anymore. I mean, I've even had people saying, it was an experiment to see how stupid people were, how they would react, and it's all just lies and made up. And I just think, I've been in court quite a lot, not that I'm bad, but I've helped a lot of people, being a Mackenzie friend and going through helping them with the paperwork, etc., and just as moral support in a lot of ways as well, because it can be intimidating. And you hear them actually talking about the legal fiction, and when they actually say, they even say and put it in the writing, the person or your person. So why is it they're talking like as if there's a third party in the room? It's like, well, there's two of you sitting there, your person. Where? What is it? But people just let it go over them, and it's as if like they've never actually heard it, So I don't know. Maybe they don't want to actually acknowledge it. I don't know.
Well, again, we have this stigmatism, which is really, they're just words on a page. Now, when I would read a charge out to somebody in the custody block after they've been interviewed and everything else, and CPS had authorised the charge, if the custody sergeant didn't do it, then the officer who was involved in the case would do it. And on the majority of cases that I did it, you read from a charge sheet, which is printed out, and someone's name and the address of the offence is handwritten sometimes. And it can simply be such as, on such and such a date, in the county of Salford, you did murder John Smith, contrary to common law. Now, you don't analyse what does common law mean. Or if you have somebody who's committed an assault, and you say on such and such a date, in the county of Berkshire, you did assault Tom Smith, contrary to the Offences Against the Person Act. Well, you don't analyse an act, Offences Against the Person Act. Well, what does that mean in relation to contrary to common law? These things are not analysed. They are just words on a piece of paper. So when you have magistrates and courts reading as a third party, they probably don't even register what they're saying, because it is a verbatim speech. It's the same with politicians. It's the same with anybody you meet, really, in officialdom. They're just reading from a script. They're just repeating what they've always said. And they don't really give any acknowledgement as to just what it is that they are saying. They make no mental connection between what they're reading and what they're saying. There is no gap of silence in between thinking and speaking where they ask themselves, just what is it that I'm saying here? That doesn't happen. So again, you are going against, a completely ignorant wall of an institution where the people who are involved and enforcing that institution really don't have the first clue as what it is they're saying. They're just repeating, they're just reading, and they're not really giving any thought as to just what it is they're reading and saying.
Now, with that in mind there, talking about there, I mean, I've had many discussions like this about sort of like the difference between a crime, which would be a crime, and an offence. To me, it actually rings easily in the mind with this whole thing now is like, oh, I'm offended, like it's an offence. Mm-hmm. And I try to explain to people, look, I mean, if you're going to commit a crime, because you always say as well, look, acts and statutes actually require consent from the government. And I went, oh, right, so which crimes do you consent to? And well, you've just done it wrong there for starters, because a crime is a crime,
Yes.
and the crime comes from against the common law. So, for instance, you mentioned murder, obviously that is a crime against common law. I mean, even God said it there, thou shalt commit murder, and various other things, theft, etc. That's a real crime. But, like you say, when it's an offence, or even, oh, you are going too fast, in my opinion, because we set the rule for that part of the road, but it's different to that part of the road. It's like, it's just an offence. Now, you might not know, but like, is there a level that you go up, like, say, in ranks where it would get to a stage, I don't know, chief inspector or whatever it was going up there, or maybe even someone in the station that actually does know this, that has, let's say, legal training, and if somebody actually started to say something to them about this, well, I'm not giving my details because I'm not a person, blah, 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 that they would actually know it and think we need to separate him and get him out of the picture before anyone else hears what he's talking about?
Good question, Real. I mean, in terms of the way in which the promotion system is now stacked, it is really stacked for the yes men. And I personally witnessed how the criteria changed, not only for new recruits, but how the promotion criteria also changed. And there were good people who did know, who were actually the leaders of men, who were really well respected within the force. And they were being passed off for promotion because they weren't yes men. And yet you have people that go with the flow of the system and where the system wishes to take it. Now, all of a sudden, the criteria has been changed in their favour. So when you start having people of sergeant, inspector, chief inspector, superintendent, and so on, they are now really the yes men of yesterday. So it's not in their interest to swim against the stream of the system. If they do know these things, then they don't utter it with any audibility above their breath. When I was there, I was speaking out against things. I was saying no. I was literally point blank refusing to do things that I was being instructed to do. I go to an incident, a domestic violence incident, and I wouldn't follow force policy because it wasn't the right thing to do. And I'd be dragged into the inspector's office saying, why did you not follow force policy? You breached force policy. And I would turn around and say, well, you sent me to the incident. I dealt with it as I saw fit. And if you don't want me to do that, then don't send me. My kind of officer is not the ones that get promoted. So you are kind of segregated and overlooked for certain things. But your senior officers now are the yes men of yesterday. It's not really in their interest to speak out or allow themselves to be heard if indeed they do have this kind of knowledge. if they do have this kind of knowledge, they've certainly took it upon themselves to find this kind of knowledge. But the ones who have that kind of inquisitive mind are not usually the ones who are in that position anyway.
Yeah, it's like I remember listening to a different documentary, but it was with John Harris, who was on the same documentary as you, and he was saying on there that he was actually taught it by someone high up. He was given an insight into the differences, and it's like, this is why, how would I put it without sounding, like demeaning? This is why, I don't think she said like people like you, but this is why the general masses never move forward, and because they don't realize what's happening, they don't realize the control they're under. I mean, did you actually meet him and chat with him about this kind of stuff?
No, I obviously listened to him many times, and of course, yes, I watched his interviews on the nature of the cage. When you start getting, I mean, it's not just senior ranks of officers, but there's fairly sometimes junior officers as well. They are members of Masonic groups. Now, if you're members of Masonic groups, then you understand a little bit more about the system and what's going on than the average person who isn't a part of that group. You have to bear in mind that there's multiple levels of masonry in different secret societies. You only really know what you are meant to know at your level of escalation of the ranks. But there are so many officers of higher rank that are members of these societies, and therefore they have a greater understanding of the system. And they are the ones that keep that from the rest of us, or at least try and keep it from the rest of us. So you will occasionally get those at the top that do understand, but they're not going to openly express that. They will not put their name to it. They are not allowed to speak of these things. So you will get the odd ones inside. I used to be, before I really got into this, before my so-called awakening, although I was extremely open-minded and I kind of knew without knowing. But I used to work with a particular officer, and every time I did, she would always mention about rhesus negative blood types and start mentioning David Icke books and different things. And we'd be in a patrol car together on nights or wherever, and we'd be having this conversation about these esoteric things. And again, this was well before my awakening, before my entry into these things. So there are officers there, even at the junior ranks, that understand what's going on. But I guarantee to you that she would never utter it to anybody that she knew that she couldn't trust. So there are people that do know things, but because they don't want to speak out and because they don't want to face any consequences of speaking out, then they tend not to. But 9 out of every 10 do not know these things.
Okay. I mean, one of the, not a good reason why I'm actually asking that question is about, like, where does it come to the level of knowing what's going on, or what's the difference between legal and lawful? What's the difference between a man who's standing as a man and a person? Like somebody I know, actually, he is of the mind he's a man, and he's not going to be a person. He's not accepting a title or whatever it is. So he's traveling in his car, right, rather than driving. Now, this occasion, he wasn't even driving. He was actually sitting in the car park. It's, so for whatever reason, they actually approached him because he was sat stationary in the car. But, his plate came up and he hadn't changed the plate or anything like that on the registration number. So it was still on their system. However, like, no tax, no insurance. They couldn't really trace, who it was. Now, he is of the opinion, because he had some paperwork that he'd sent, very similar to John Harris, saying, oh, well, look, I am a man, I'm not a person, and obviously you're never going to get a reply. Don't think at the stage where we were at then, the Queen did not reply, going off. No problem then. All right. So, so he's of the opinion in his mind that no rebuttal is an acceptance, which, I mean, if you look at contract law, you can argue that. Okay. So I'm not saying he was wrong, but anyway, he got arrested. He got took in there and said, well, you haven't got any tax, you haven't got any insurance. And he says, they said, have you got your license? He says, oh, I don't have a license. So they're like, you can see that he videoed it. This is how I know as well. And he was telling, and the shock on it was only a young PC's face. He was like, you haven't got a license? Yeah, you haven't. And he was like, no, I've got an ID card. It just had a photograph saying his first name, and it's ID. It's definitely ID. So anyway, they wouldn't arrest him, and they were like going backwards and forwards, saying, "I've never seen anything like this before. What do we do here?" And eventually, the radio, like somebody came in, very aggressive, dragged him out of the car, took him away. Now he got there, and he just said the same, like presented to whatever the desk sergeant. There's my ID. My name's Fred. And that's it. And that's all he ever said. So he was taken away. They went, well, we're just going to hold you until we can take you to court. I held him for a few hours, not like, not 12 hours or anything like that. It was only a few hours, 4 or 5. It's still not very great if you're stuck in the room on your own, but, and eventually they just took him out the back door and basically were like, sod off out of here, get out of my face. He's convinced it was the paperwork, and it was like it's been accepted by the Queen and everything. I'm not arguing with him. I don't know. No one's ever going to know. So I'm only going to ask you an opinion. My opinion is it's because he didn't accept he was the person. He didn't give them the actual full capital name. He only ever said his first name, and that was it. It's all he ever said. So, somebody knew somewhere higher up that thought, look, we just got to get rid of this guy. He's going to be a pain in the neck. He's going to cause confusion, if nothing else, to these officers that are already confused. But I mean, I'm presuming it's because he didn't give joinder, he didn't give the name, and then he's not accepting the title or the person. But I mean, obviously, because you were in that field, that's why I'm asking the opinion. What would you think? Would it be the paperwork, or was it because he didn't give the actual joinder and didn't accept he's the person?
When you are coming up with this information, it is really like using quantum physics in the kindergarten. There's a different level. Now, when you are in the police and you see somebody sitting on a car park, and again, I've said this many, many times to people within common law that know common law, that know their rights. The police don't. And what they're using is suspicion. Now, if I go to somebody who's on a car park and they're just sitting there, and then all of a sudden, I don't know who they are. They're committing offences because they have no insurance, they have no licence, they have all of these things. It is so easy to turn around and say, well, I wish to summons you to court for those offences. But I can only do that if I know who you are, if I have a full name, if I have an address, etc., etc. So you can be arrested until those details are obtained. If those details are available at the scene, then the officer can make the decision, okay, well, I'm just going to summons report you now, verbally, and then the paperwork will come through in due course. I would suggest that they probably validated who he was when he got to the station. Having validated who he was, and it came to light that maybe he did have all of these documents, maybe did have these insurances, then he can be released with no further action. Again, it goes back to the face saving exercise. I don't know what his demeanour was like at the scene with the officers. I don't know what was said. But again, you have to give them space to retreat. You have to give them space to save face. And that is an easy rhyme to remember. Space to save face. If you become obstructive, argumentative, then they will put up this wall again of egotism, of authority, of, okay, we'll deal with this another way. You're coming with us. We'll lock you in a cell for 4 or 5 hours and see how you like that. I'll go and take my time, so you spend a little bit longer in the cell. Now, if there's a warrant for your arrest and we don't like you, we'll go and find you on Christmas Eve, knowing that there's no thoughts for 6 days. So you'll stay in custody over Christmas for 6 days. It is really their backlash way of saving face. Not all of them are that way. I wasn't that way, so not all of them are. But it really depends on the circumstances, the demeanour, and the situation at the time. Can you confidently validate who this person is? Can you confidently validate what they're doing there? And yes, I understand traveling and driving and being in a vehicle and being in charge of the vehicle. If you have the keys in your possession, then you are considered in charge of that vehicle, because you can get into that vehicle at any time you wish and travel or drive or whatever terminology you wish to use. So from a police perspective, they are operating from a different dimension of perspective to the people who are increasingly beginning to know the law. Now, I will guarantee that because of all of these YouTube videos of people going to police stations and saying, yes, it's not illegal to film you, I can do what I like, I can do this, X, Y, and Z, there will be training in relation to that now for police officers, or at least an input as to what to do, because it's not illegal to film. But until people began to film and the police began to challenge them filming, the police didn't realise these things. So a lot of the time it is a really long and enduring way of educating those in authority, educating them to the truth system. But how a police officer acts and what happens as a consequence really depends on the circumstance. And I would suggest that they validated who this person was. They realised there was no further action to be taken, and they just let him go.
Okay, yeah, interesting. It's funny actually, because I was going to bring up about the actual filming thing, because we know that Sir Mark Rowley he's actually come up now and asking people to desist from filming because it makes them stressed, which I think is hilarious, really. I mean, I think the only kind of thing you should ever do if you're in some kind of situation is to film what's going on as proof of what actually happened, because you can't write it down, you haven't got time, and plus it's just your version. If it's getting filmed, then everybody can see what happens.
Yes,
I'm certainly not advocating anybody to go and stand outside police stations and be standing there with the cameras, and I know a lot of people do, and they call themselves auditors. Fair play, I'm not telling anyone what to do, but I mean, now you've got to see easily that it's becoming more and more common that this type of action does happen.
yes.
What I'm surprised at, and obviously, like that Mark Rowley's actually said it now. Look, can you try and cut it out a bit? Because they're getting stressed out. They're trying to do a job. They're first on the scene and all of that. I mean, he's trying to make it about a scene of an incident. Yes, I get that. But it's amazing to me that still, like you've just said there's got to be some kind of training. Look, this is what's going to happen if you see somebody filming you. But it just seems to either they haven't been trained yet, or they missed that memo. But some of them go up so argumentative simply because somebody's got their phone out, or they're filming a camera, and I'm going to arrest you because you're a terrorist. I mean, how comes that they're just so ignorant of normal legal statutes even, and how it's not illegal just to stand in the public?
Now, the whole world is completely ignorant in one way or another. The whole world is completely ignorant to the invisible forces that run society. There's not many people that even know that there's an invisible force. Again, going back to the police only know what their training tells them, and if they've not been given input into this new revolution of being provoked into saying and doing things, then I'll be extremely surprised. If I was a senior officer, then I would be giving my officers input into what they can and can't do. See, in terms of filming, it really depends on the intent of the person who's going to do the filming. If it's to educate the officers in terms of, actually, there's a flaw in your knowledge of the law here, and we wish to expose that, and we wish to seal that knowledge. If you are going there with the intent to provoke things, then I would question your motives, because you are not doing any favours to anyone. Yes, in terms of filming a scene, no, because people who are victims at the scene have a right to some privacy. They have a right to a dignity. And if you are the victim of a crime, for argument's sake, it's a car crash, or you are the victim of a violent crime, the last thing you want is some stranger sticking a camera in your face. That's a complete no-no, because the victim has a right to that privacy. And I can understand officers at that scene saying, "Sling your up, move." In terms of going and filming a police station, there is no offence. Anywhere in this country, we have more CCTV cameras than anywhere else in the world.
Oh, no.
So at any given time, you are on camera. So somebody turning up with a Samsung A14 and filming at the front of the police station is going to make little difference to the footage that is available. Officers can become extremely nervous when you have somebody coming to a police station and taking film and photographs of private registration plates, because we all know there are ways and means to trace, and that's not just those who are authorised to trace, but there are ways and means for people to trace names and addresses from vehicle registration plates. So they can become extremely, shall we say, annoyed and irritated when people are taking their private number plates. If they were not to react at all, if they were to turn around and say, "Well, look, you're standing outside the front of a public building, a police building. He's taking footage of a police building, which anybody can come up and see with their eyes anyway. So let's just leave him to it." He'd get bored and walk off. The only reason that they stay and film is because the officers come out and they engage. They engage in the game. And that is something for them to learn from. Don't engage in the game. And it's also something for the people who are the other side of the game to actually question the intentions of what they're doing. Because what I've found is when people start doing things with frequency, then we get legislated against. So you have people, doing these protests. Some of them resort to violence. Some of them go with the intent to cause violence. But all you are doing is giving the system an excuse to legislate it even further. So really, really consider just what it is that you're doing and what your intentions are for doing it. If it's to re-educate, fine. If it's to provoke a reaction, that provoking a reaction will eventually lead to greater legislation. So you need to be wise, you need to be smart, and really just have a look at your intentions for what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. A lot of people, you see, they're complaining that there's a new act about this and a new act about that, and it's about trying to actually stop people protesting or stop people putting their point forward. That is probably a result, a lot of it, of trying to actually provoke officers and things like that back. I mean, we can't really say, but it certainly won't be helping by people going and just annoying the police for the sake of annoying them and trying to actually get a reaction out of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the system sits back and it watches and it thinks, wonderful, because now you are giving us an excuse. Because you just turn around and look at the oil protesters when they're gluing themselves to the M25, and the police are told, don't do anything about it. Why? Because now the public are going to get a little bit miffed and sick and tired of people gluing themselves to the road, stopping them going to their hospital appointments, stopping them going to school, stopping them going to work. So what do the public do? Government, you need to do something about these idiots. Okay, let's just legislate further. They didn't need to legislate further. There's numerous laws in relation to dealing with people who glue themselves to lampposts and roads. There's ample laws in which to remove them. But if you want to increase that control and bring greater control, then you just wait for people to start asking for it. And the only reason that they ask for it is because the people who are doing these things are not thinking about what they're doing. What they're doing in reality is giving the system of control an excuse. And they just sit back and wait. So all of this going to police stations and filming and doing this and antagonising people and going to scenes and filming victims, and I guarantee you down the line there will be legislation against it. So all you're doing is, you are championing a cause. You are bringing greater dystopian laws on everybody else by doing it. So again, you need to be wise, you need to be smart. And instead of just trying to build up a follower on YouTube, a following on YouTube where everybody's saying that you're great and it's needed and this, that, and the other, think about the long term, what you are doing in the long term, because what you are doing is affecting everybody else. So think before you do anything.
Yeah. I seen one good video, and it was a guy, I think he pulled up in a police motorbike, and got off the motorbike, and it was actually somebody in an office, or at least people in an office, complaining, and he was walking up and down the street filming. But it's in a public street, and
Yes.
he had turned around, the guy got off the motorbike, and he actually said, well, look, he's only here to wind you up and get a reaction, and look what you've done. If you ignore him, he's going to go away and get bored. And so, eventually, he got them to go back into the office, and the guy on the camera was actually laughing. He went, oh yeah, that's the best answer I ever had. I may as well leave now.
It is, because what you are doing by reacting to it is giving him a reason to stay, giving him a reason to continue to film, giving him a reason to continue to antagonise. If you ignore him and say, as I say, there must be 1,000 people that walk past this building every day that can see it with their own eyes. A camera eye is not going to make much of a difference. Just ignore them, let them be, and then they will have nothing to film. They'll have nothing to antagonise. They'll have nothing to show their increasing subscribers on YouTube. Let it be, and they will go away. They are there to antagonise and create a reaction. And by creating a reaction, you are giving them what they want, which is the filmmaking opportunity. So again, if people start using their intelligence and start thinking, the public have been conditioned to be scared.
Yeah.
The public have been conditioned that everybody wants to do them harm. If you are walking down the street with a camera, it's because you are working out the layout of the building to blow it up. People have been conditioned to the point of being scared out of their wits. And when they see something that conforms to that programming, that is the reaction that you get. And that reaction allows these filmmakers to film.
Yeah.
So what they're doing is trying to provoke a reaction to give to their audience, to say, look how good I am. Look what a brilliant job I'm doing for the world, for the community. Now, actually, what you're doing is you're bringing dystopia on us, because you're not thinking what you're doing.
Yeah, it's actually shooting all of us in the foot, really.
Yes, absolutely. I guarantee again, there's so many hundreds of videos now about going to police stations, waiting for them to come out, goading them, waiting for them to come out of the front office and have a go at you, and then start saying, yes, but I know the law, you don't. Well, I'm afraid at that moment in time, what you know about the law is completely irrelevant, because if they're going to arrest you, it's no point saying, well, I don't consent to being arrested. It has no relevance whatsoever. Once the decision has been made, all you can then do is start documenting evidence of wrongdoing. But at the point a decision is made to arrest you, all the knowledge of common law, all the knowledge of I do not consent to this, has no bearing whatsoever. What has a bearing is your knowledge of gathering the evidence of what's happening. And of course, police now have body cams. So at the moment they press the button, it is evidential. If a police officer approaches you and you have a camera, then you have a right to film it, because it is evidential. Now, if an officer tries to seize that camera from you, then they are effectively tampering with evidence, which is a life sentence. So you need to advise them that if they take this film off you, then they are tampering with evidence, which is deep problems for them. They've committed a criminal offence. But that's not provoking the situation. That is defending yourself. That is saying that this is being recorded. So if I do anything, or you do anything that is illegal or untoward, then this ensures that we act correctly. but I'm not doing it to provoke anybody. I'm not going onto their territory and saying, look at me, I'm recording you to get a reaction so I can look brilliant on YouTube. I'm doing it for both of our protection. And that's why police have these body cams, because then it protects them from allegations, from wrongdoing, from illegalities. So to gather evidence for protection, that's fine. To do it to provoke a system to bring dystopian laws down the line seems to me a little bit idiotic.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's a good point there as well. You know, like what you've said there is, you know, like, well, let's just say that you were approached by like a police officer for whatever reason. I don't know. It could be, you know, he might have saw something different. You know, he might have thought he saw something, and there's nothing wrong in that. I think everybody has to be at least part of society. You don't have to be antagonistic just because you don't want to be part of the system being a person, but you do have to at least be a decent man. Let's call it that way.
Yes.
So like, but so if you were filming it, so, you know, obviously the officers themselves probably wouldn't even be in the mind of thinking, I'm going to take the camera, you know, or like, don't film me, I'm going to take it off you, because they probably wouldn't even think that they were committing an offense, because they wouldn't know, because like you just mentioned before, they wouldn't have that training anyway, and it would probably put them on the back foot if they says, well, you know, if you actually take this as tampering with evidence, you know, I mean, you're talking about a life sentence there, tampering with evidence. It would at least maybe make them think a bit and think, I think I'll get on my Google here. And
yeah, it is because again, if you make it clear from the offset, you know, if a police officer approaches me in the street, I don't, you know, I don't necessarily like the system either. I don't necessarily like the mindset of police officers. I think they are really a protection racket for the system, and I oppose that. But if an officer approaches me in the street and they approaches me as a decent person, then I should reflect that and be a decent person. You know, I would always be, if anybody, police officer, not approached me in the street to speak to me, I would come from a stance of being me, from being a decent person. I don't have a problem with speaking to somebody. If they feel the need to speak to me, then I will speak to them. If there comes a point when they start to say, well, you look like somebody that we're looking for, and they start to then question me as a suspect, then I'm quite within my right to say, well, hold on a moment, I'm going to record this for my protection and for your protection, because I want to act correctly, and I want to ensure that you also act correctly. You have your video camera for you, and I have my camera for me. And if they turn around and say, well, if you film it, we're taking it, then I would remind them that to do so would be tampering with evidence, because this is now evidentially mine. It is for my protection. It is for me, if I wish to take any legal action in the future, this is my evidence. Now, if you start taking my evidence, then you are tampering with evidence. What is the difference between that and me going to a crime and start hiding things? Or start, you know, looking at CCTV footage and it doesn't actually reflect what you want it to reflect. So you get the tape and it ends up in the bin somewhere. What is the difference? You know, evidence is evidence. Any evidence that is tangible has to be disclosed in court. And if they are removing your cameras or deleting your footage, then that cannot be presented in court, and therefore you are tampering with evidence. So it is the way in which you behave, it is the way in which you approach the subject, which often gets the reaction that you either want to see or you don't want to see. But if they just want to come up and speak to me about something, I don't have a problem. If they're speaking to me as a suspect, then I'm beginning to think, well, I need to protect myself here because so I'm going to start filming. And there's a big difference between the two. There's a big difference between antagonizing things, as I've said, and getting a reaction, or doing it for the right reasons. If you're doing it for the right reasons, good on you. If you're doing it in the correct way. If you're doing it to antagonize to get a reaction, then you are responsible for the increasing controlling laws that we are now being exposed to. So, well done.
Yeah. I mean, that's really good to actually get, like the outlook and the opinion of someone who is really like from let's just call it the lawful side, who was like, let's just say one of us, if you want to call it that way, but has got that experience of being frontline in the police to know both sides of the coin and like what the whole scenario is like and how it feels to be on duty. I mean, if we look back, say, let's go back to 2020, when literally, right, the whole world got turned upside down for whatever reason. We're not going to like, the theories of that, but the stress that must have been put onto, like, say, police officers. Well, I'm not sticking up for anybody, by the way, so don't shoot me. Like, but like, they must have been like, well, now I have to do so many different sort of like these, let's just call them laws, because that's the way that they talk about it, and if you haven't got like this on and you haven't been doing, if you're walking in the woods and, and there was like so many ridiculous arrests and ridiculous events. But at the same time, they must have been thinking, well, I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do, so I'm just going to do it all.
Yes, it's very much the case, because if you imagine, the government, and I pretty much heard them say this in interviews, they pretty much left so many grey areas that the police had to interpret, and they were interpreting it completely wrong. Even the College of Policing, which is really to do with the training of police officers, were saying these things are not arrestable offences, and yet people were being given fixed penalties. A fixed penalty cannot be issued on the street. It has to be done in court. That's why now you have penalty notices, because a penalty notice is different to a fixed penalty. And there's all of these grey areas of something that they were told law, which was not law. And as a consequence, people were being arrested or fined for something that wasn't illegal. And again, I'm just using the accepted, understood terminology about illegal, lawful, all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they were given so many grey areas in which to interpret, and they interpreted it wrong. Because again, like everybody else, they were not thinking. Nobody was thinking. Nobody was giving this any critical thought in these positions of authority. Had it been me, I guarantee that I would not have issued one single fine. I would not have done anything outside of this. When I was instructed, and my team was instructed by senior officers to go out and manipulate stop and search figures, I refused and they refused. So it's not me just saying that I wouldn't do it for the sake of it. I would not have done it. In the same way as I refused to arrest anyone. Now, I had the highest arrest rate for any officer for my area for probably 5 or 6 years running. And it wasn't just petty crime, it was serious crime. And I had more arrests than anybody in my station for many years running. And I turned around and said, I'm no longer arresting anybody. Deal with that. And they didn't know how to deal with that. So it's not me just saying, because I'm sitting here, in my house years on, that I'd go against the system, because I truly would. And I truly did. So it was all of these burdens that were put on officers with such grey areas that they had to interpret it themselves without any guidance, really, in terms of how to interpret it. Because what we had at the time was really social disapproval techniques. Everybody was policing everybody else. So that, the governments can turn around and say, what they were also doing is they were not going through the due process in certain aspects. So when they went through to the COVID Act, well, that went through Parliament, it went through the Lords, and it was signed off by royal consent. So that is law, effective law. But what they were doing then is they were penciling in subsections within the law that had been passed. So these subsections had not actually gone through due process, so they were not law. And to put it into the language of a police officer so that they would understand is, and I've said this to officers so that they do understand, you go to the house of a witness or a victim of a crime, and you do a written statement, which is meant to be their words, it's meant to be verbatim, their description, their feelings, what they saw. And at the end of writing their statement, you hand it to them and you say, read through it. And they read through it, and at the end you say, are you happy that that is what you've said to me? And if they say yes, you say, well, can you sign it here, here, and here, and can you date it there? That is now written evidence, agreed and signed by the witness. Now, if I go back to the police station and I then start writing little things in between their words, then I am tampering with evidence. Again, so what the government were doing by writing things in between law, were acting unlawfully because it wasn't law. In the same way that a police officer would really be done for perverting the course of justice if they were to add words to the victim's statement after it had been signed. And that's what the government were doing in terms of the Coronavirus Act. They were acting unlawfully. They were pretty much perverting the course of justice. And everybody that was prosecuted under these subsections that weren't passed into law, they were the victims of this perverting the course of justice. So I would not have done what the police were doing. But again, all of these things are done to generate a reaction. And the reaction that is generated gives an excuse to take a certain direction. And that is what we see time and time again. And all of these people that are really up with common law and really up with the system and really up with all of these different acts and sections, they really do need to be aware that there's a greater force that they can't see beyond the police, and they are really attacking the wrong enemy. So what I would say is, again, think and be smart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, it's hard, like for like, let's just say, if you've got people that are in, let's call it the common law side, and they're trying to, be part of, I'm lawful, I'm not looking at legal, I don't want to be a person, I'm a man. And then they see these things. I mean, we obviously, the amount of videos that came out of everything that happened there was huge. But I've seen a couple that I thought was really distressing, that you had like officers literally breaking down front doors and breaking into houses simply because like a member of the public had rang them and reported, oh, there's more than 3 people in that house. So, I mean, that is just like overstepping the mark ridiculously. And it is. Like, say, I've never, I haven't been in that position, but I mean, my first reaction would be, well, I need to go and question the morals and the reasons why somebody's calling in that type of call. Really, then, like there's people getting robbed, murdered, broken into, surely. Yeah. But obviously it didn't work out that way. But
no, because again, this is the directive. This is what you'll concentrate on today. This is what you'll do. And again, because no one thinks, they just follow the herd. One of the doors that didn't get kicked down was 10 Downing Street.
Yeah.
Now, I guarantee that when they were having their parties, and this has never been mentioned as far as I can ascertain in the media or by government or by anything else. For those who've been to 10 Downing Street, and I have, because I worked in London as a police officer, there is an iron gate that was put there in the times of Margaret Thatcher to stop the IRA driving car bombs up Downing Street. Now, at this iron gate, you have armed and unarmed police officers. You also have a little X-ray machine like they do at airports. So anybody coming to 10 Downing Street has to first go through the authorities, has to then go through this mini security, airport security, before they are let in. But before they are let in, they have to be expected to be there. Now, what I mean by that is you can't just turn up and say, I have an appointment. Your name is given on a list beforehand. So when 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 people turn up for a party at Downing Street, the police knew about that well ahead of advance, because they had to look at their list and say, yes, Richie Sunak there, yeah, Noreen Doris, yes, you're on the list, you can come through. So they would have had to be given these names ahead of time. So the police knew what was going on inside government buildings. Now, why didn't they put down the door? It's all been hush-hush, the police involvement and their knowledge of what was going on at the party. And the only reason that the police acted was because of public pressure, because everybody else was being fined and summoned to court and taken to court for doing less than the lawmakers would do. Those who were telling us we must do this were doing the complete opposite. Now, again, if you widen that bandwidth of thought, and they're telling us all that, If we get together in groups of 6, 5's okay because the virus can count. But if we get into groups of 6, then we are in danger. Well, what did they know that we didn't? Because they were in groups of more than 6. So if they're telling us that we are in herd congregations, we are in greater danger of this killer virus, they must have known that they were in no danger at all. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gone to the party. You wouldn't have congregated with hundreds of people or however many people it was. So what they were telling us was completely the opposite to what they knew. But the police knew there was a party going on, and they knew it was going on before it happened, because they had to sign people and allow people through the gate with certain passes. So why wasn't the door put down? Why is it one rule for them and one rule for us? And these are the kind of questions that people need to intelligently, peacefully, calmly ask. And all it takes is a revolution of the mind. It doesn't take a revolution of Trafalgar Square smashing windows and looting, because again, that's just animalistic nature that's having a consequence for everyone. You need a revolution of the mind. You need to think differently. You need to ask questions. You need to point it out that there's certain standards that should be expected when you are in these positions. And if you don't meet them, you must leave. But we accept and we allow it to continue. So that's our fault. How many people will you speak to or hear newscasters interviewing on the street at polling time or about politicians, and they say, oh, they're all corrupt, they never tell the truth. So why do we allow such a system to impose on us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, you've seen it like many a time, you know, like it's hard to actually sort of like try and get like oh, I don't know. I don't want to be insulting about people, but say the vast majority of people just like say have got blinkers on and don't pay any attention to what's going on or what's being said. And you could see it all the time, the amount of people that were even in the buildings that the TVs could see, the cameras could actually see. I mean, I don't watch television, but I mean, obviously everybody sends me clips of things, and, you know, especially when there's news things and they've been said. So you could see, hang on a second, and if we're not allowed to go and visit Granny, how comes they're all getting together in that huge big group there then? You know, and even the most ridiculous ones that we're coming out with, they're just saying, are they doing this to actually wind you up and see how ridiculous you will actually start acting? Whereas if you can go and eat something in a restaurant, but if you stand up, you have to put a mask on because it'll get you. If you sit down, you're totally fine. It's not bothered. It only gets people who are standing up. So if you get, so that means that if you're only like 3'2", little kids walking or whatever, well, you're all right then. You know, it's only the people that are like, you know, taller, you know, that are actually going to get infected.
But that's how ridiculous it is. I know somebody that worked in a hospital at the time of COVID, and they were surveyors, fire line surveyors, so they needed to get in all areas really. And they went into, there was the person I know and one of his colleagues, and he had a mask on, but his colleague didn't. And they walked into a staff room, and there was a doctor in the staff room by herself, and she walked in. She was having a lunch in the staff room, and as they walked in, she turned around and said, why aren't you wearing a mask? And he said, well, you're not wearing one either. And the doctor turned around and said, because I'm eating. And my friend turned around and said, well, that's the cure for coronavirus, then you just got to eat. Now, if these are genuine statements from doctors, that they believe that if they're eating, the virus will leave them alone. Is it the lamb's blood on the door of the Passover meal, is it? You know, the angel of death will pass them over if they put blood on the door. You know, where do they get these perceptions from? That this killer virus that can travel from China to England in 2 days, you'll be safe from if you sit 6 feet away from each other. If I go into a supermarket that has a plastic screen, but it has a 2-foot gap at the bottom so I can pay for the groceries, that this virus is not going to find the gap. You know, how intelligent is it that it can count, that it has a tape measure, that it can tell the time? And these are statements from doctors. It's not going to affect me because I'm eating my lunch. Yeah. It's not going to affect me because I'm at work. Well, how does the virus know if you're at work or not? And yet people, it's absolutely bewildering how people can be so insane as to have this kind of rationale. Now, people were saying, you know, in the so-called conspiracy arenas, that what they're doing is they're trying to find out who are the opposers of the system. They're trying to, you know, whittle us out and expose who we are. But I turned it on its head and said every kind of Reich system have always been in favour of the strong. They've always wanted to, should we say, eliminate the weak of society. So turn it on its head. They're trying to expose who are the weak, because it is the weak they don't want. And all of these people, the herd that walk around with their masks and comply and get involved in these social disapproval techniques of policing ourselves. My neighbour's got more than one person in the living room. Now, these people do not have anything between their ears. They really don't. And that's not me trying to be offensive in any way. It's just the reality. They really have less intelligence than a beetle. And again, these are the people that are bringing dystopia upon the rest of us. But they now know who are the strong and who are the weak.
Yeah, no, that's very true as well. I mean, the thing is as well, you can imagine, you know, let's just say that you would have them watching movies, like say for instance, like Schindler's List or something like that, where you would have neighbors reporting people, and they would say, he is not terrible, and reporting it, and they were doing exactly the same. Everybody was doing it, you know.
Yes.
It was absolutely crazy the way that people acted. Just
Yeah,
blew my mind. But
because people generally haven't evolved since caveman times, and their mental capacity hasn't evolved at all. We still believe in Christ. We still believe in religions that are thousands of years old. Most people have no critical thought. They have no true rationale. They have not evolved in any way from the animalistic nature, and that really is the exact same as Schindler's List. Now, if you look at all the Jewish people that had numbers, well, we're just numbers as well. You know, we all have a national insurance number. If you are a police officer, you have a shoulder number or collar number. If you are in the army, you have a number. You know, we are just numbers. So we are really just the branded cattle. But the fortunate thing is for those who wish to bring control upon us, is that 9 out of 10 people have no brains. And again, I'm not being offensive, I'm just saying it as it is. They really have no capacity to think. And it's because of that that the rest of us have to suffer.
mm-hmm. Yeah. I have to admit, this whole thing that what I had envisaged talking about like today with you has been completely different. You know, it's not my intention at all. I had all of these different questions, but it just got carried away the way it did. So I'm very happy with it actually. But what I don't want to do is go on too long, take your time, but also for people watching, because I know they get like, oh, it's enough for me. But I definitely need to go and have a chat with you again, because I've never asked anything I wanted to ask about the UFOs or the children's books or any of the esoteric stuff or anything. But it's been massively interesting. So I mean, you know, please, you know, don't take offense at that. It's been fantastic.
No, not at all. As I said at the beginning, you know, taking whatever direction you want. I mean, where I am now in my own personal journey is what the police taught me really was how to gather evidence, how to present evidence, both verbally and written, how to present that like I did in a court environment, which is really just stick to the salient facts. So that investigative training really is now used to expose a lot of the secrets of the past, a lot of the secrets that we're not being told, a lot of the things that are in plain sight, such as the many photographs behind me, where I've deciphered their true meanings. I can tell you who the characters of the Bible really are. I can tell you what the true meaning of the stories really are. I can tell you about creation. I can tell you about what people believe to be God that has not yet been created. And I can tell you about the universe or universes. I can tell you about the Big Bang. I can tell you about all the quantum physics equations that just pop in my head that I write down that relate to free energy systems. So that is where I am now in terms of my journey now. But of course, I'm only here as a result of what we've spoken about in this interview. So it really was a foundation stone for me. But now I'm kind of in a different parallel. I'm in a different dimension. I'm in a different time zone to where I was then. That was almost a past life, even though it's in the same life. It's almost the past. I have moved on vibrationally, mentally. Now my life is now an ancient initiation, and all of these wonderful knowledges are coming my way that answer the questions to anything of an esoteric nature. So that is where I am now, and at any time you want me to come back and speak about them, it would always be a pleasure.
Most definitely. But in reality, what you just said as well, you wouldn't be talking, or at least being in the knowledge that you actually are now and going down the routes on your journey now, if you hadn't have been where you were. So you've got that grounding, and then it's the developing you and developing your mind. And then I think once you show the universe that you're open to certain things and certain ideas, then the universe gives it to you. And then once you've actually accepted it, and you show your acceptance and show your intelligence to use it, then it gives you more. So you progress that way.
When the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and it really is. When we talk about secret societies, again, there's a lot of truth movements that have it completely wrong. And when I first started out, I also had it completely wrong, and then I learned the truth. There's a lot of demonization of secret things. There's a lot of demonization of symbols that truth groups are completely misunderstanding their meaning of, their original meaning of. When we talk about why secret societies are silent, because silence is really the presence of awareness. It is not the absence of sound. So by remaining silent, you are bringing in the presence of awareness. And it is this awareness that enables you to go to these higher realities. You do that through mathematics, you do that through symbols, you do that through codes. And this enables you, and through geometry, and that's why all of these ancient sites are geometric in nature, because they are a gateway to this higher reality. So these things are kept silent because people need to raise their game in order to walk into the presence of awareness. If you have no awareness, then you will not enter that space. So a lot of these truth groups and UFO communities that have it wrong, in the same way that I had it wrong when I first started out, they basically need nurturing in the right directions to these sacred meanings. And I can now take people to the 7th level of 7 in terms of the sacred teachings and what they mean. But I could not have done that unless I had the analytical mind of being a police officer, of seeing the worst and the best of humanity, to facing some of the most horrific things that people could only ever have nightmares about. And that has forged the person that I am now. So with thanks to that period of life, even though it is now gone, even though the vibrations are now not compatible with where I am now, had it have not been for that period of life, I would not be in this vibration now. So it is with thanks and gratitude, but I now move on from it.
No, that's absolutely brilliant. I love to hear that as well, because I mean, what I want to do is I want to leave it there, sort of like from what we've covered, because I do think it's given a good foundation for you and your background to be where you are, and so we can sort of like talk again, but like move on to like the newer subjects and sort of like what you've been doing and what you're into, your research and everything that you've been doing, your books and everything, because there's some fantastic stuff that I wanted to actually talk about. But, I think everything happens for a reason. And I think, the way that the actual talking and the chat progressed there, I think gives us a good launch pad for the next one and how things should be, really.
No, so again, these things direct us in the most suitable way. I don't mind speaking about my past. I don't mind speaking about my history, because again, I repeat, without that, then there wouldn't have been near the future. The past has educated my future, and again, it is with thanks It just grounded me, just given me the tools that I need to do the things that I do now. And the things that I do now, I get greater fulfillment out of. I help more people than I ever did. And now, I have manifested the future that I wished. And if I can do it from a Black Country, West Midlands council estate, second education school that was pretty much described as the class done place teachers, if I can do that, then anybody can do that. And then people have to go ahead of time and create that space for other people to move into. And the space that I'm creating is the presence of awareness. And that is where I'm taking as many people as I can.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. Okay, I think that's a really good point to actually end on. So, I'd like to thank Michael very much, choking there, Michael very much for being here and sharing his knowledge and his life experiences, and also to tell you about the straw man nature of the cage, that he was there and he was a real policeman. Okay. But thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. Now, because of the grounding that we've had there, we're going to hopefully, fingers crossed, that we'll be allowed to do more chats. So keep an eye out for them. But thank you very much for everyone for watching. And thank you again, Michael, for coming on today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
I'll just stop.